The wind moved through the pine forest like something alive. Cold rain mixed with snow slapping against Daniel Carter's face as he drove the shovel deeper into the frozen earth. The cemetery was silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that made every sound feel wrong. Every scrape of metal against dirt seemed too loud, too sharp, as if the forest itself was listening. Daniel paused, leaning on the shovel. His breath came out in white clouds. "Just a little more," he muttered. He forced the blade into the ground again. The soil was heavy, wet, clinging to the shovel like tar. Each scoop sent black clumps of mud sliding back into the growing pit. Above him, dead leaves spiraled through the wind. Somewhere in the distance, a branch cracked. Daniel froze. He slowly looked into the darkness between the trees. Nothing. Just the forest. Watching. Waiting. He wiped sweat from his forehead, even though the air was freezing. The hole was already waist deep, and at the bottom of it was a coffin. Daniel's shovel struck wood with a dull thunk. He closed his eyes. There it was, the sound he had been digging for, the sound he had been dreading. For a moment he just stood there, staring down into the pit. His chest felt tight, not from the cold, from the memory. Emily, his wife, 6 months dead. And now he was standing over her grave with a shovel like a grave robber. But Daniel didn't climb out of the hole. He grabbed the shovel again, because there was no other choice. Not anymore. Not after what had happened to Lily. The wind screamed through the cemetery. Daniel jumped down into the grave. The coffin lid was only inches below the dirt now. He brushed the soil away with trembling hands. The wood was dark and swollen with moisture. His shovel clattered against the side of the grave. And that's when he realized something. He hadn't brought a crowbar. "Damn it!" Daniel laughed under his breath, a broken sound.
A man digging up his own wife's grave, and he forgets a crowbar. Perfect. He drove the shovel blade into the seam of the coffin. It barely moved. The wood groaned. He pushed harder. The shovel slipped. He swore and slammed it again, and again, and again. The lid refused to give. "Come on," he growled. His hands slipped. The shovel bounced off the wood. Daniel threw it aside and grabbed the edge of the lid with his fingers. Splinters tore into his skin. He pulled. Nothing. He pulled harder. The nails screeched. Pain shot through his hands. He kept pulling. Wood cracked. A sharp splinter drove under his fingernail. Blood ran down his palms. He didn't stop. Minutes passed. Maybe an hour. Time lost meaning in that hole. All that existed was the coffin, the wood, and the ring. Because inside that coffin, on Emily's finger, was a sapphire ring worth more money than Daniel had seen in his entire life. And Lily was dying. Doctors, medicine, hospital bills. Daniel's hands were red with blood and mud now. He roared and yanked again. The coffin lid split with a horrible, cracking scream. The sound echoed through the trees. Daniel froze. For a moment he thought he heard footsteps in the forest, but the wind swallowed the sound. Slowly, very slowly, Daniel lifted the broken lid. Hours later, he sat at the kitchen table. The house smelled of smoke and damp wood. A candle flickered between them. The ring lay on the table. Gold, deep blue sapphire. Even in the weak candlelight, it glowed like a tiny star. Daniel wrapped both hands around a mug of tea, but he wasn't drinking it. Across the room, Margaret Carter stood near the stove.
Daniel's mother. She stared at his hands, at the dried mud beneath his nails. Then her eyes moved to the ring. Her face slowly went pale. "You went there," she said quietly. Daniel didn't answer. "You dug her up." The words hung in the room like smoke. Daniel rubbed his eyes.
I didn't have a choice. Margaret shook her head slowly. You disturbed her rest. I needed the money. Daniel pointed toward the corner of the room. A small figure lay beneath blankets on the couch. Lily, 8 years old. Her skin was pale as paper. Sweat soaked her hair. She tossed in fever, whispering in her sleep. "Mom." The word cut Daniel like a knife. "She needs doctors," he said hoarsely. "Medicine from the city." Margaret covered her face with her hands. Daniel slammed his fist on the table. The ring jumped and spun across the wood. "God abandoned us," he shouted. "Emily would forgive me." His voice cracked. "She loved Lily more than anything." Margaret whispered something under her breath, a prayer. Then she said something that made Daniel's skin crawl. "That gold will bring trouble." The wind howled outside the cabin. "Listen to the forest," she whispered. "It's angry." Right then, bang! Someone pounded on the front door. Lily whimpered in her sleep. Daniel stood up so quickly his chair crashed to the floor. The door burst open. Cold air flooded the room, and a man stepped inside. Travis Cole. Tall, wide shoulders, rain dripping from his black jacket. His eyes moved slowly across the room, first to Daniel, then to the table, to the ring. His smile spread slowly. "Well now," Travis said. "Looks like you had quite the late-night walk." Daniel felt his stomach drop. Travis leaned against the doorframe. "I saw you out by the woods last night." His eyes gleamed. "With a shovel." He nodded toward the ring. "Nice piece." Then he looked back at Daniel. "So tell me," his smile widened, "are we splitting the profit? Or should I stop by the sheriff's office tomorrow?" And in the corner of the room, Lily began coughing, hard, violently. Daniel looked at his daughter, then at Travis, then at the ring, and something dark began to rise inside him, something dangerous, something that would soon drag him far deeper into the nightmare than digging up a grave ever could. And that was only the beginning. The bus rattled along the empty highway like it was about to fall apart. Daniel Carter sat near the back, staring through the foggy window as endless pine trees slid past in the gray morning light. Blackridge was already miles behind him. His fingers stayed buried in the pocket of his jacket, gripping the ring so tightly the sharp edges of the setting pressed into his skin. It felt heavier now, colder, almost alive. Travis Cole's voice kept echoing in his head. "Are we splitting the profit? Or should I visit the sheriff?" Daniel clenched his jaw. He couldn't go back without money, not with Lily getting worse by the hour. The fever, the coughing, the way her breathing rattled like something was trapped inside her chest. Doctors had already said it. Without treatment in the city hospital, she might not survive the winter. And treatment meant money. Money Daniel didn't have. Except now, maybe he did. The bus finally groaned to a stop at the small city terminal in Missoula, Montana. Daniel stepped out into cold wind and traffic noise. The city felt enormous compared to Blackridge. Car horns, neon signs, people rushing past without looking at each other. It all made his head spin. He walked for nearly an hour through narrow streets before he finally saw a small sign hanging above a basement door. Antiques, appraisals.
The windows were dusty. The paint was peeling. But inside the glass case, he could see old watches, coins, jewelry. Exactly what he needed. Daniel opened the door. A small bell rang. The smell hit him immediately. Old books, dust, metal polish. The shop was dim, lit only by a desk lamp behind a cluttered counter. Stacks of papers and ancient books filled every corner.
Behind the counter sat an old man with thick glasses perched on the end of his nose. He looked like a tired sparrow, thin, gray, fragile. The man didn't look up at first. Daniel cleared his throat. "Excuse me." The old man slowly raised his head. His cloudy eyes studied Daniel for a moment. Then he pointed to the chair across from the desk. Daniel sat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel pulled the ring from his pocket and placed it on the green felt pad in front of the man. The gold caught the light immediately. The sapphire glowed deep blue. The old man leaned forward. His eyebrows slowly lifted. "Well," he muttered, "that's unusual." He picked up a magnifying glass and studied the ring closely. Minutes passed. The only sound in the room was the ticking of an old wall clock. Daniel tried to stay calm, but something about the way the man stared at the ring made his stomach twist. Finally, the old man spoke again. "Where did you get this?" Daniel had already prepared the lie. "It belonged to my wife." The man didn't look convinced. "Family heirloom?" The magnifying glass hovered over the ring's band. The old man rotated it slowly under the lamp. His eyes narrowed. Daniel shifted in his seat. "So, what's it worth?" The old man didn't answer. Instead, he stood up and walked slowly toward a tall wooden cabinet behind him. He opened it and pulled out a thick, leather-bound book. Dust rose into the air. Daniel felt his heart beating faster. The old man returned to the desk and flipped through the pages carefully. Finally, he stopped. Then he turned the book toward Daniel. Daniel leaned forward. On the yellowed page was a drawing. A ring, gold band, dark sapphire. Strange carved symbols running along the inside of the metal. Daniel's breath caught. It was the same ring. Exactly the same. The old man tapped the page with one thin finger. "You see these markings?" he asked quietly. Daniel nodded. "Runes," the man said. "Old ones." Daniel forced a laugh. "Okay, but how much is it worth?" The old man removed his glasses. Now he looked directly into Daniel's eyes, and something about his expression made Daniel's chest tighten. "It's worth a fortune," the man said. Then he closed the book. "But I won't buy it." Daniel blinked. "What?" The old man folded his hands. "Every collector of cursed artifacts knows this ring." Daniel stared at him. "Cursed?" The man nodded slowly. "The ring grants wishes." Daniel scoffed. "Come on." But the old man didn't smile. "Anything you truly want." Daniel felt his pulse quicken. "That's ridiculous." The old man leaned forward slightly. "But it never gives anything for free." Silence filled the shop. "The price," the old man whispered, "is always paid later." Daniel looked back at the book, at the picture of the ring, at the strange symbols carved into the metal. "You believe that?" he asked. The old man studied him for a long moment. Then he spoke quietly. "You took it from a corpse." Daniel froze. The old man sighed. "You're a terrible liar, son." Daniel looked down. For several seconds he said nothing. Then the truth spilled out. "My daughter is dying." His voice shook.
I needed money. He swallowed hard. So, yes, I took it. The old man didn't look angry. He just looked tired. He pushed the ring back across the table.
Take it and leave.
Daniel frowned. You said it's worth a fortune.
It is.
Then buy it. The old man shook his head. I'm not putting that thing in my shop. Daniel's patience snapped. I don't believe in curses. The old man leaned back in his chair.
That doesn't matter. Daniel grabbed the ring. The metal felt icy. Something has already started, the old man said quietly. Daniel stopped. What? The old man looked toward the window, as if expecting something outside. Every wish needs balance. Daniel rolled his eyes. You're crazy. He shoved the ring back into his pocket. I'll sell it somewhere else. The old man didn't try to stop him. As Daniel reached the door, the old man spoke again. One more thing. Daniel turned. If you truly love your daughter, the old man's voice dropped to a whisper. Don't make a wish. Daniel stared at him. Then he opened the door and stepped outside into the cold city air. The doorbell jingled behind him. He walked down the street, shaking his head. A cursed ring, he muttered. Yeah, right. But his hand kept drifting back to his pocket, feeling the ring, feeling the strange weight of it. And the old man's final words echoed in his mind. Don't make a wish. Daniel reached the end of the street. Traffic roared past. Snow began to fall. He stared down at the ring in his palm. The sapphire seemed darker now, deeper, like a small, endless pit. Daniel exhaled slowly. Lily has to live, he whispered. Then he slid the ring onto his finger. At that exact moment, the streetlights flickered, and somewhere far away, a dog began to howl. The pawn shop sat on the corner of a narrow street 2 blocks from the bus station. A crooked neon sign buzzed above the door. Gold, cash, loans. Half the letters were burned out. Daniel Carter stood across the street for a long moment, watching the flickering light reflect off dirty snow. The old antique dealer's words still echoed in his head. Don't make a wish. Daniel clenched his jaw. He looked down at the ring on his finger. The sapphire caught the streetlight and glowed deep blue.
Cursed, he muttered under his breath. Yeah, right.
He crossed the street. The bell above the pawn shop door rang as he stepped inside. The smell hit him immediately. Cheap cigarettes, old clothes, metal and dust. Behind a thick glass window sat a heavy-set man with drooping eyelids and a gray beard. A small plastic nameplate read, Rick Sanders. Rick barely looked up. Selling or borrowing? Daniel pulled the ring from his finger and dropped it into the metal tray beneath the glass. Selling. Rick picked it up lazily. At first, his expression didn't change. Then his eyebrows rose slightly. Well, now. He grabbed a jeweler's loop and leaned closer to the lamp. Daniel watched every movement. His heart pounded louder with each passing second. Rick scratched the band with a testing file. The sharp sound made Daniel flinch. Rick grunted. Gold's real. He rotated the ring slowly. The sapphire flashed under the light. Rick squinted. Stone's old. Probably sapphire. Daniel leaned forward. So? Rick grabbed a calculator and tapped numbers slowly. The clicking filled the room. Somewhere behind the wall, a man coughed violently. Rick finally looked up. I'll give you 15,000. Daniel blinked. That's it? Rick shrugged. Pawn shop, not a museum. Daniel leaned closer to the glass.
That ring is worth way more than that.
Rick smirked. Then sell it somewhere else. Daniel hesitated. $15,000 wasn't enough for everything Lily needed, but it was still more money than he had ever held in his life. He pictured her pale face, her weak breathing, the fever. Daniel nodded slowly. Fine. Rick counted the money out in worn bills. The stack looked thick, heavy, real. Daniel signed the receipt without reading it. Rick slid the cash through the tray. Daniel grabbed it.
For a moment, the world felt lighter. Hope crept into his chest. Maybe this would work. Maybe Lily would live. He turned toward the door. Then something strange happened. The bell above the door rang before he touched it. Daniel stopped. Someone had just entered. A tall man in a dark coat stepped inside. Snow dusted his shoulders. Daniel froze. It was Travis Cole. The man smiled slowly. "Well, look at that," Travis said. "Small world." Daniel's stomach dropped. "How did you—" "I followed you," Travis said casually. He nodded toward the counter. "You really thought I'd let you run off with a ring like that?" Rick looked between them. "You two know each other?" "Old friends," Travis said. Daniel clenched his fists. "You got what you wanted," he said quietly. "Now get out." Travis leaned closer. "Not quite." He glanced at Rick. "How much did he get?" Rick shrugged. 15 grand? Travis laughed. "That's adorable." Then he looked back at Daniel. "You owe me half." Daniel shook his head. "No." Travis's smile faded. "You forget something, Danny?" He leaned closer. "I saw you at the cemetery." Daniel's chest tightened. "Digging up your dead wife." Rick straightened in his chair. "What?" Daniel's voice turned cold. "You're bluffing." Travis's eyes darkened. "Try me." Silence filled the pawn shop. Daniel slowly slid half the cash across the counter toward Travis. Travis grinned. "Now we're talking." He pocketed the money. Then he turned to Rick. "Mind if I take a look at that ring?" Rick shrugged and pulled it from the drawer. The moment Travis touched the ring, the lights flickered. Just for a second. Rick frowned. Bad wiring. Travis ignored him. He studied the ring carefully. "Funny thing," Travis said. "This ring looks familiar." Daniel's throat tightened. Travis slowly slipped it onto his finger. The sapphire flashed. For a moment, Travis stood perfectly still. Then he laughed. "Nice." But as he started removing it, he paused. The ring wouldn't move. He pulled harder. Nothing. The smile slowly vanished from his face. "What the hell?" Rick chuckled. "Probably stuck. Happens all the time." Travis tugged again. The ring didn't budge. Instead, the sapphire suddenly pulsed. Just once, like a heartbeat. Daniel felt something cold crawl down his spine. Travis's expression darkened. "What kind of junk did you sell me?" Daniel didn't answer because suddenly he remembered something. The antique dealer's voice. "The ring grants wishes." Travis scowled. "Get this thing off." Rick grabbed some oil and rubbed it on Travis's finger. They pulled again. Still nothing. The ring refused to maneuver. Rick frowned. "That's weird." Travis's patience snapped. "Cut it off!" Rick grabbed a small metal cutter, but before he could use it, the front door burst open. A freezing gust of wind blasted through the shop. The lights flickered violently, and outside, somewhere in the distance, A wolf howled. Travis slowly looked down at the ring. The sapphire glowed darker now, almost black. Then Travis whispered something under his breath. A wish. Daniel didn't hear the exact words, but he saw Travis smile again. And for some reason, that smile terrified him. The wind slammed the pawn shop door shut behind them. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. The fluorescent lights above flickered once, twice, then steadied again. Rick Sanders wiped his hands on a rag and stared at Travis's finger. "Well," he muttered, "that's one stubborn ring." Travis Cole's jaw tightened. The gold band sat perfectly around his finger. Too perfectly. It hadn't moved even a millimeter. He twisted it again, harder. The skin around the metal turned red. Still nothing. "Cut it," Travis snapped. Rick lifted the small ring cutter again. The blade touched the gold and stopped. Rick frowned. "That's strange." He pressed harder. The blade slid across the surface like it was made of glass. No scratch, no dent. Rick looked up. What the hell is this thing made of? Travis's patience snapped. "I said cut it!" Rick tried again. Same result. Nothing. Daniel Carter stood frozen near the door, his eyes locked on the ring. The sapphire had changed. He was sure of it. Moments ago, it had been blue. Now it looked darker, almost black, like a drop of night trapped in gold. Travis noticed Daniel staring. "What?" he snapped. Daniel shook his head. "Nothing." Rick leaned back in his chair. "Well, congratulations." He nodded toward Travis's hand. "Looks like you just bought yourself a permanent accessory." Travis glared at him. "Funny." Then he looked at Daniel again. "You said this belonged to your wife." Daniel didn't answer. The antique dealer's warning echoed in his mind. Every wish has a price. Travis flexed his fingers. The ring gleamed under the light. "Relax," he said with a crooked grin. "It's just a ring." He turned toward the door. Then he paused. His expression changed, like he had just remembered something important. Slowly, Travis looked down at the sapphire. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You know what I could use right now?" Rick raised an eyebrow. "What?" Travis smiled. "Money." Daniel felt a cold wave move through his chest. "Travis," he started. But Travis ignored him. He rubbed the ring slowly with his thumb. "I wish," Travis murmured quietly, "I had enough money to never worry again." The moment the words left his mouth, the lights exploded. Glass bulbs shattered with loud pops. The shop plunged into darkness. Rick cursed. "What the hell?" Outside, thunder cracked across the sky, even though there had been no storm before. Daniel's ears rang.
For a moment, everything went silent. Then, beep! A sound came from Rick's computer. The screen flickered back to life. Rick squinted at it. Huh. He tapped the keyboard. The computer beeped again. Rick leaned closer. What the? His eyes widened. "What is it?" Travis asked. Rick slowly turned the monitor toward him. On the screen was a bank transfer confirmation. A massive number filled the page. $3,500,000. Travis blinked. "Is that?" Rick nodded slowly. "Looks like someone just wired you $3.5 million. Silence filled the pawn shop. Daniel felt his stomach twist. "That's impossible," he whispered. Travis stared at the screen, then at the ring, then back at the screen, and suddenly, he started laughing. Loud, wild. "You see that?" he shouted. He pointed at Daniel. "Did you see that?" Rick shook his head.
Where the hell did the money come from? Travis didn't care. He grabbed the printed confirmation. It doesn't matter. He waved the paper like a victory flag. I'm rich. Daniel's hands were shaking now. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Because he could still hear the antique dealer's voice in his head. The price is always paid later. Travis slapped Daniel on the shoulder. Guess today's my lucky day. He walked toward the door. Rick called after him. You might want to check that with the bank. Travis waved without turning around. I will. The bell rang as he stepped outside. Cold wind rushed in again. Daniel stood there for several seconds. Then he followed. Snow had begun falling harder. Street lights painted the road yellow. Travis stood on the sidewalk, staring at the confirmation paper again. He looked drunk with excitement. $3.5 million, just like that. Daniel swallowed. Travis, he said quietly. Travis didn't look up. What? You shouldn't have said that wish. Travis laughed. Oh, relax. He lifted his hand. The ring glowed faintly under the streetlight.
This thing's the best investment I've ever made.
Daniel felt dread creeping up his spine.
You don't understand, he said. I think that ring... Sirens screamed somewhere down the street. Both men turned. 2 police cars sped toward them, lights flashing red and blue. They screeched to a stop right in front of the pawn shop. Officers jumped out. Travis Cole, one of them shouted. Hands where we can see them. Travis froze. What? Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. One officer approached slowly. We have a report of a bank robbery this morning. Travis blinked. What does that have to do with me? The officer held up a tablet. On the screen, security footage from a bank vault. A masked man stuffing cash into a bag. The timestamp matched the exact moment Travis had made his wish. And the amount stolen? $3.5 million. The officer looked up. Funny thing is, he pointed at the screen. The system says that money was transferred to your name. Travis stared at the tablet, then at the ring, then back at the officer. His voice trembled. I didn't rob anything. The officer grabbed his arm. You can explain that at the station. They slammed Travis against the police car. Handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Snow fell quietly around them. Daniel stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching, understanding. The ring had granted the wish, but it hadn't created money. It had simply taken it from somewhere else. Travis was shoved into the back seat of the police car. As the door slammed shut, he looked at Daniel through the window. His face had gone pale. For the first time, he looked afraid. And the ring on his finger was glowing. The police car disappeared into the falling snow. Its red and blue lights faded slowly down the street until the city swallowed them completely. Daniel Carter stood frozen on the sidewalk. Snowflakes melted on his jacket. His breath came out slow and heavy. Inside the pawn shop, Rick locked the door and pulled down the metal shutters.
Hell of a night, Rick muttered through the glass before disappearing into the back room. Daniel didn't move. His eyes were still fixed on the empty road where the police car had been. The ring had granted the wish, but the price had arrived instantly. $3.5 million, stolen from a bank. And now Travis was the one paying for it. Daniel felt a deep chill creep through his chest. Every wish has a price. He remembered the old man's warning again. Daniel shoved his hands into his pockets and started walking toward the bus station. Snow covered the streets. Traffic was thinning. The city was settling into night. But Daniel's mind was racing. He needed to get home, back to Blackridge, back to Lily. Because if that ring truly had the power the old man described, then maybe there was still a way to save her.
The bus ride home felt longer than the trip to the city. Daniel sat alone in the back again. The heater rattled weakly. Outside the windows, the dark forest stretched endlessly beneath the moon. Pine trees blurred together into a black wall. Daniel leaned his head against the glass. For the first time since leaving the pawn shop, he allowed himself to think about what had happened. Travis had made a wish, and the ring had delivered, but not without consequences. Daniel remembered the exact moment, the flickering lights, the cold wave in the room, the sapphire pulsing like a heartbeat. Something unnatural lived inside that ring. Something old, something hungry. And now Travis had it. Daniel exhaled slowly. Maybe that was for the best. Maybe the curse had moved on. Maybe Daniel and Lily were safe now. But a small voice in the back of his mind whispered something darker. You touched it first. You took it from the grave. You woke it up. The bus groaned as it climbed the final hill toward Blackridge. A handful of dim lights glowed in the valley below. Daniel stepped off the bus into the freezing night.
No voices, just wind moving through the... No voices, just wind moving through the trees. Daniel walked quickly toward his cabin. His boots crunched loudly in the snow. When he reached the porch, the door creaked open before he even knocked. His mother stood there. Margaret Carter looked pale. Her eyes were red.
Daniel, she whispered. Fear tightened in his chest instantly. What happened? Margaret grabbed his arm. You need to come inside. Daniel stepped into the cabin. The fire in the stove was burning low. The room smelled like medicine and wet cloth. Lily lay on the couch again, beneath thick blankets. Her breathing sounded worse. Much worse. A terrible rattling sound filled the room with every breath she took. Daniel rushed to her side. Lily? Her eyes fluttered open weakly. Dad. Her voice was barely a whisper. Daniel's chest tightened painfully. I'm here, he said softly. He grabbed her small hand. Her skin felt burning hot. Margaret spoke quietly behind him. The fever came back stronger this afternoon. Daniel clenched his jaw. I got money. Margaret looked confused. What? Daniel pulled the stack of cash from his pocket and dropped it onto the table. $15,000. More money than Margaret had ever seen in her life. Her eyes widened. Daniel, where did you... It doesn't matter, he said. We're taking her to the city tomorrow. Margaret stared at the money. Then, slowly, her eyes moved toward the door. The forest has been strange tonight, she whispered. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? Margaret swallowed. The wolves. Daniel felt a cold knot form in his stomach. What about them? They've been howling for hours. Right on cue, a long, distant howl echoed through the trees. Then another, and another. Daniel stepped toward the window. The forest beyond the cabin was dark, silent.
But something about the shadows felt wrong. Too many shapes moving between the trees, too many glowing eyes reflecting the moonlight. Daniel's breath caught. There were dozens of them. Wolves, standing just beyond the tree line, watching the house, waiting. Behind him, Lily coughed weakly. Daniel turned back toward her, and for a moment, he thought he saw something impossible. The sapphire ring, resting on Lily's small finger. Daniel's heart stopped. He was absolutely certain. He had sold that ring to Travis. Yet there it was, cold, black, and slowly pulsing, like a living heart. Lily looked up at him weakly, her voice barely audible. Daddy? Daniel leaned closer. What is it?
Her pale lips trembled. "The man in the forest." Daniel felt ice spread through his veins. What man? Lily's eyes slowly drifted toward the dark window. Her voice came out like a frightened whisper. "He says the ring belongs to him." Daniel Carter slowly turned toward the window. The wolves were still there, dozens of them, standing silently at the edge of the forest like a dark wall of fur and glowing eyes. They weren't moving. They weren't growling. They were just watching, waiting. A shiver crawled down Daniel's spine. Behind him, Lily's breathing rasped weakly against the quiet of the room. Margaret stepped closer to the window and gasped, "Daniel, why are they just standing there?" He didn't answer, because he already knew the answer. They weren't watching the house. They were watching the ring. Daniel turned back toward Lily. The sapphire glowed faintly on her thin finger. The blue light pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. Each pulse seemed to match the weak rhythm of Lily's breathing. Daniel reached toward it carefully. "Lily, where did you get this?" Her eyelids fluttered. "The man," she whispered. Daniel froze. "What man?" Lily's small finger twitched. "The man outside." Margaret's face went pale. "There's no one outside." But Lily shook her head weakly.
"He's standing in the trees." Daniel forced himself to look back through the window. The wolves hadn't moved. But beyond them, between the black trunks of the pines, something shifted. A shadow. Too tall to be a wolf. Too still to be a man. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. Then the shape moved, just slightly, enough for the moonlight to catch a pale face. Daniel stumbled back from the window. "Someone's out there." Margaret grabbed his arm. "What?" "The woods," he pointed. "There's someone in the woods." Margaret slowly peered through the glass. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she whispered something under her breath. A prayer. Because she saw him too. A tall figure standing among the wolves. The animals didn't attack him, didn't fear him. They simply stood around him like soldiers around a king. And the man was staring straight at the cabin. Straight at Lily. Daniel turned back toward his daughter. He gently grabbed the ring and tried to slide it off her finger. The moment he touched it, pain shot through his hand. Daniel jerked back with a hiss. The ring burned. Not warm, burning hot, like metal pulled from a fire. Margaret grabbed his hand. "What happened?" "It burned me," Daniel said. He stared at the ring. That thing shouldn't even be here. He had sold it. He had watched Travis take it, watched him get arrested. Yet somehow, it had come back. Margaret whispered shakily, "Maybe that man brought it." Daniel's blood ran cold. Lily coughed again. Her breathing sounded worse now, a thin, wheezing rattle. Daniel knew that sound. Doctors had warned him about it. When the lungs began to fail, that sound came first. Panic clawed at his chest. "No," he muttered, "not yet." He grabbed his coat. "We're going to the hospital now." Margaret looked toward the forest again. "The wolves." "I don't care about the wolves." Daniel lifted Lily gently into his arms. She felt terrifyingly light, like he was carrying a bundle of sticks instead of a child.
Her head rested against his shoulder. "Daddy," she murmured, "I'm cold." Daniel wrapped the blanket tighter around her. "It's okay." He forced confidence into his voice. "We're going to the city." Margaret grabbed the car keys from the table. The old truck outside coughed and groaned as the engine started. Daniel stepped onto the porch. The freezing air hit his face, and the wolves immediately reacted.
Low growls rolled through the pack. Their glowing eyes followed every step Daniel took. Margaret whispered from the doorway, "They're not letting us leave." Daniel stared at the forest, at the tall figure standing among the trees. The man hadn't moved, but Daniel could feel his gaze. Heavy, patient, waiting. And suddenly, the wolves parted. A narrow path opened through the pack, straight down the road. The man in the forest lifted one pale hand slowly, as if inviting them to pass. Margaret trembled. "Daniel, this isn't right." Daniel swallowed hard, but Lily's breathing grew weaker against his shoulder. He didn't have a choice. "We're leaving," he said. They hurried to the truck. The wolves watched silently as the engine roared to life. Daniel climbed into the passenger seat with Lily in his arms. Margaret pressed the gas. The truck rolled forward slowly. The wolves didn't chase them. They didn't move at all. They simply watched the vehicle pass through the opening in their circle. As the truck reached the road, Daniel glanced back toward the forest. The tall figure still stood there. But now the moonlight revealed something Daniel hadn't noticed before. The man's hand was raised slightly, and on one of his fingers, a deep black mark circled the skin, like something had once been there, something removed. Daniel felt his stomach twist. The truck drove away down the frozen road, but far behind them, deep in the forest, the wolves lifted their heads and howled together. And the man smiled in the darkness.
The old pickup truck roared through the frozen road, its headlights cutting narrow tunnels through the falling snow. Margaret gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Neither of them spoke. The forest on both sides of the road looked darker than usual, heavier, like it was pressing in around them. Daniel sat in the passenger seat, holding Lily close to his chest. Her breathing was shallow now. Each breath came with a weak wheeze. The ring on her finger pulsed faintly, blue light flickering under the blanket. Daniel tried again to pull it off. The moment his fingers touched the metal, the burning pain returned. He hissed and jerked his hand back. "Still there?" Margaret asked quietly. Daniel nodded. "It won't come off." Margaret swallowed hard. "That man, in the woods." Daniel stared out the windshield. "I don't think he was just a man." The truck rattled as they crossed a wooden bridge over the frozen river. The town lights of Missoula appeared ahead in the distance. For the first time that night, Daniel felt a spark of hope. Just a little further. Just a little more time. Lily stirred weakly in his arms. "Daddy?" "I'm here." Her pale eyes looked up at him. "Do you remember when Mom used to sing to me?" Daniel's throat tightened. "Yeah. She said when people die, they go somewhere warm." Daniel forced a smile. "That's right." Lily's eyes drifted toward the ring. "But the man said that's not true." Cold fear slid through Daniel's chest. "What man?" "The one who gave me the ring." Margaret's foot slipped slightly on the brake. "What?" she whispered. Daniel leaned closer. "When did you see him, Lily?" "Before you came home," she said weakly. "He knocked on the window." Daniel felt his heart stop. "He said he used to own the ring." The truck engine hummed louder as they entered the outskirts of the city. Streetlights illuminated the falling snow. Lily's voice grew faint.
"He said the ring gives what you want most."
Daniel stared at the glowing sapphire. His mind raced. "Did you wish for something?" he asked quietly. Lily nodded slightly. Daniel felt dread coil in his stomach. "What did you wish for?" Lily's lips trembled. "I wished that you wouldn't die."
Daniel froze. The truck suddenly felt very quiet. Too quiet. Then Lily whispered something that made his blood run cold. He said that wish was very expensive. The ring pulsed again, brighter this time. Daniel suddenly understood something terrible. The ring had granted Travis his wish, but the price had been prison. Daniel had taken the ring from the grave, and Lily had wished for his life. The cost had to come from somewhere. And suddenly Daniel remembered something else. The way he looked in the mirror earlier, older, exhausted, drained. The ring had already started taking from him, but Lily had made a new wish, a bigger one. Daniel slowly looked down at his hands. The skin looked thinner, wrinkled. His breath caught. Margaret glanced at him. "Daniel?" Daniel didn't answer, because his reflection appeared in the side mirror, and it was changing. Hair turning white, skin sagging, age rushing across his face like time had suddenly accelerated. Years, decades, draining out of him, feeding the wish. Lily looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. "Daddy, why are you crying?" Daniel smiled weakly, because now he understood the price. The ring never created life. It only moved it. He kissed her forehead. "It's okay." His voice sounded older now, much older. Margaret looked over and gasped. "Daniel?" His hands were trembling. The ring flared with dark blue light. Lily's breathing suddenly became stronger. The wheezing faded. Color slowly returned to her cheeks. The wish was working. But Daniel felt something inside him collapsing, his heart slowing, his vision dimming. The years were leaving him. All of them, at once. The hospital building appeared ahead.
Margaret slammed the brakes, and the truck skidded into the parking lot. "Daniel, stay with me," she shouted. But Daniel barely heard her. He was staring at Lily. Her eyes looked bright again, alive, healthy. She sat up slowly. "Daddy?" Daniel reached out with shaking fingers and gently touched her cheek. "You're okay now." Lily smiled weakly. "Did I get better?" Daniel nodded. "Yes." Tears rolled down Margaret's face. "Daniel, what's happening to you?" He didn't answer, because he already knew. The ring had taken everything he had left. Years, strength, life, all of it, to pay for Lily's wish. Daniel's body slumped back in the seat. His breathing slowed, then stopped. Snow fell quietly around the truck. Margaret screamed for help as nurses rushed from the hospital doors. They pulled Lily out first, alive, breathing, strong. And on her small finger, the sapphire ring slowly faded. The gold darkened, then cracked, and finally turned to black dust, as if its work had been finished. But deep in the forest far away, the tall man stood among the wolves, watching the distant city lights, waiting patiently, because rings like that never stay gone for long.